The key to a good life. The key to a good life. As we gather here on this Recognition Sunday, we can say without a doubt that education has been a major quest in the journey of black and brown people in this country. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard University, which he accomplished in 1895, only 30 years after the end of the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation. Mary McLeod Bethune was born to formerly enslaved parents. She championed education and ultimately founded the Daytona Normal and Industrial Institute for Negro Girls, which later merged with Cookman Institute and is now known as Bethune-Cookman University. Anna Julia Cooper was born in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1858. She was born an enslaved person and later, after emancipation, attended Oberlin College and earned a bachelor's and master's degree in mathematics. She taught high school in Washington, D.C., and when she decided to focus on college prep for her black students, the white leadership blocked her efforts. She resigned and went back to school. Cooper went to Columbia University to get a PhD, and when her brother died, she pulled out of school to take care of his 5 grandchildren. She went back to school in 1924, and in 1925, Anna Julia Cooper became the 4th black woman to earn a PhD at the age of 67 years old. There are many names that we could call today. Each name tells a different story of perseverance, of resilience, and determination. The point is that many of us have been told to get all the education we can because it's the one thing nobody can take from you. Parents and grandparents saved and sacrificed to send you away to school and send the next generation away to educate themselves. They wanted someone to have opportunities they did not have. They worked multiple jobs. They stayed up late and woke up early just to make sure that tuition bills were paid and bellies were full. Education has always been a part of the dream, and let's not forget that the church has played a role in making the dream a reality. In the early days of our historically black colleges and universities, distinguished pastors sometimes became college presidents. Denominations provided financial support to schools with church connections, and congregations would use Sunday offering plates to send resources to help these struggling institutions. Morehouse College had its start in the basement of a church. The General Baptist State Convention of North Carolina is one of the most consistent and reliable institutional contributors to Shaw University. Education has always been a part of the dream. There have been roadblocks and setbacks, and scholarships to boost minority enrollment are, for the most part, a thing of the past. Tuition continues to rise, and scholarship dollars seem harder to find, but we have continued to educate ourselves. Some students take the traditional path from high school to college, and some students will take alternative paths through the military or on-the-job training and even going to school at night and on the weekends, but education has always been a part of the dream. And it should be, but as important as it is for us to get education, we also need the gift that gives education, helps education to mean something and gives it purpose. We need the gift that helps us to know what to do when we're dealing with something that's not written in the textbook. There are questions in life that you cannot answer with a formula that you learned in calculus. We need a gift that helps us weigh options when all the options seem equally good and determine which one is the best way forward. We need the gift that helps us when we're trying to figure out which job to take when we have an option, which house to buy, when you should buy a house, if that relationship is right for you, should you go back to school and when and where, what should you study, how to raise these children that God gave you, and what do you do when it looks like life is not working. The gift that we need, and the gift that I'm speaking about, is the gift of wisdom. Knowledge is indispensable, but wisdom is not the same as knowledge. in so many classrooms, the goal is the pursuit of knowledge. When we know something, we can act on it. When we have knowledge about what keeps our bodies healthy, we can act on that knowledge. When we have knowledge about financial matters, we can act on that knowledge. When we have knowledge about the science of the world, we can understand how the physical world works. Knowledge is good. Some would even say that knowledge is power, but knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing. You know, human beings have more access to knowledge today than we've ever had in the history of humankind. I heard an interview not long ago with the woman who developed something called the CRISPR technology. CRISPR is an acronym, and don't ask me what it stands for, but it gives us the ability to map the human genome. We can now edit. I'm preaching now. We can map the human genome. We can edit genes in our cells that alter the DNA of living organisms. And the good news is that this will cure diseases. The bad news is, well, we really don't know. But human beings always find a way to mess stuff up. Give it a little time, and a mad scientist or a mad capitalist will find a way to ruin the party for everybody. Let's not fail to mention artificial intelligence, aka machine learning. At the push of a button, we can do things that it used to take us hours to do. We can calculate, we can analyze, we can summarize and illustrate data in the fraction of a time that it used to take. And apparently, commencement speakers across the country did not fully appreciate how college graduates were feeling about artificial intelligence. Because you may have seen some of the videos, some of them got up in the podium and talked about artificial intelligence, and the class of 2026 booed them. Why would you celebrate something that's going to take a job from you? Knowledge comes from information. Wisdom is knowing what to do with that information. Sometimes you might know something, but you don't need. You might know what you want to say, but you don't need to say it. That takes wisdom. There's a psychologist who pioneered the study of wisdom, and he said that people are wise to the extent that they use their intelligence to seek the common good. Wisdom is not selfish, it's not self-centered. Wisdom considers what is good for others. Now, Solomon is regarded as one of the wisest men who ever lived. He's credited with being the author of much of the book of Proverbs, which are sayings and statements that point and promise wise thinking and wise living. You can see how the path to wisdom begins to unfold for Solomon in the events that happen in 1 Kings chapter 3. This was very early in the reign of Solomon as king over Israel. His father David, before him, had successfully united 12 tribes into a single kingdom. That meant Solomon inherited an enormous responsibility and a prosperous nation at a young age. And at the beginning of his reign, Solomon went to a place called Gibeon, which was an important high place for making sacrifices. And as a new king, Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. That was a spectacular display of devotion to God and dedication to God. And according to 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 5, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream after the sacrifices and said, "Ask me for whatever you want." Think about that. God comes to you in a dream and says, "Ask for whatever you want." What would you request in a situation like that? Would you ask for a need to be met? Would you ask God to give you special powers or abilities? Would you ask God to undo something that in your past? Would you ask God to answer a mystery that has had you stumped and confused for years? Or what would you ask God if God said you can ask for whatever you want? Solomon thought about it. He said, "God, you've been kind to my father, and because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart, and you've continued this kindness because you made his son, me, the king, to sit on the throne to this very day. And now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father." Water. "But I am only a little child, and I don't know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people, and that you have chosen a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and distinguish between right and wrong. He said, because who in the world could govern such a people like this? Solomon asked God to give him the right kind of heart, a discerning heart to carry out his duties as king. And the Lord was so pleased that Solomon asked for this, that the Lord said, not only will I give you wisdom, but I'm going to give you some things you did not ask for. He could have asked for the death of his enemies, but he did not. He could have asked for wealth for himself, but he did not. Solomon said, give me a heart that is governed by wisdom. And if we want to avoid the traps that trip people up in life, if we want to take the path that leads to the gifts and promises that God offers freely and generously, then we've got to understand that the key to a good life is wisdom. Solomon told the Lord that he did not want to serve a single day as king without being able to tap into God's wisdom. The task was too great for him. He was too young and too inexperienced. And let me say it this way, divine wisdom is what we need when life pushes us beyond our natural ability. Divine wisdom is what we need when life pushes us beyond our natural ability. The Bible did not give us Solomon's exact age when he became king, but he says, Lord, I'm just a little child. He might have been a teenager, might have been 20, might have been 21, but can you imagine the task of administering justice and leading an entire kingdom when you are 18 or 19 or 20 years old? Even if we account for the fact that people grew up faster in Solomon's time, that's still a very young age to be the sovereign ruler of an entire nation. Because in that role, not everybody who's close to you wants to help you. Some people wanted to get close to Solomon to influence him to do what they wanted him to do. He needed wisdom to know how to navigate his royal roles and relationships and responsibilities. And even with your newly minted degree and diploma, you will need wisdom to know how to navigate what God has for you in store for you, the new roles and new relationships and new responsibility, because divine wisdom is the key to life when life pushes us beyond our natural ability. Have you ever had to do something that you knew that was just a little beyond what you had ever done before? Maybe you moved into a caregiver role and you've never done that before, and it is stretching you beyond your natural ability. Maybe you took on a new position and you're grateful for the opportunity, but people at work see you as too young and too inexperienced like they did Solomon. Life has a way of putting us in situations that can stretch us and push us and even test our natural ability. It takes us to the edge of our intellect. It pushes us to the limits of what we learned in school. And when that happens, we don't need another book. We need some divine wisdom. I thank God for every degree that I've earned and that you've earned. But here's the thing. Do not neglect the gift of wisdom. Your education will take you places that textbooks did not prepare you to handle. And so how are you going to deal with critical coworkers without losing your job? You need divine wisdom that takes you beyond the limits of your natural ability. How will you handle freshman year on a new college campus when you're trying to do everything that you haven't done before? Well, and you got no supervision. You need some divine wisdom. How are you going to make your new degree work for you as hard as you work for it in this unusual economy and changing job market? You are going to need some divine wisdom. When you've got a medical decision to make and you've never been to medical school, you need good counsel and some divine wisdom. If you're feeling stuck trying to decide between option A and option B, and they both look good, and the longer you look, the more confused you get, you need to sit back and ask God for some divine wisdom, because your natural ability may be insufficient. That was Solomon's concern. He knew that he was in the position of king, but he wasn't ready for everything that being king required of him. What did he know about exercising justice for an entire nation? He did not know enough. We know that. So he asked God to give him a discerning heart. And God said, I will give you a wise and discerning heart, because wisdom is the key to a good life. Solomon became so wise that people came from all over to listen to him. Many of his sayings are written down in the book of Proverbs, and we don't always pay attention to the book of Proverbs, but the words in this book are life-shaping and life-changing. And what I like about Proverbs is that you don't have to remember a lot to get what you need. These sayings are short and memorable and powerful and applicable to situations we face every day. In fact, you know, if you're of a certain age, that we used to have all these wisdom sayings that would get passed down from one generation to the next. We've kind of moved away from talking like that. My mother was always telling me what her parents told her: a stitch in time saves nine. I don't know a lot about sewing, but I figured out exactly what she meant. You can lead a horse to water. That's all the sermon somebody needed right there. A fool and his money soon part. That one's easy because I have experienced that one. No one had to teach a class on these sayings. We just heard them so often that eventually you figured out what they meant. And so now when we look at the Old Testament and it talks about wisdom, it's not talking about the philosophical idea of wisdom. No, wisdom is knowing how to live a good life. But wisdom is not just knowing how to live the good life. It's about having the skill to navigate the ups and the downs, the wins and the losses, because according to Proverbs, wisdom is the key to having a good life. The opposite of wisdom is folly, which means the opposite of wisdom is being a fool. In the Bible, fools never end up in a good position. In fact, Proverbs 1:7 says, fools despise wisdom and instruction. So the question today is, how do we get more wisdom so we can have a better life? How do we become wise? Well, that's why we're looking at Proverbs 2 as well, because becoming wise starts with assuming the right and the proper position with God. If you want to be wise, it starts with assuming the right position with God. That means to become wise, we need to remain open to learning something new. Once we adopt a position or a mindset that we know everything, we cut off the flow of divine wisdom. Solomon, even though he was king and really nobody could tell him anything, said, I do not know how to carry out these divine duties. And then God gave him wisdom. One of the things I've appreciated about my own mother is that the longer she lives, the more she continues to learn. She's 86 and taking a class for her personal growth and development. Her brother, my late uncle, was the same way. He was a pastor and was always trying to learn more about being a better pastor, even 20 and 25 years into the work. He was always giving me another book to read about how to be a better pastor. And here it is, Proverbs 1:5 says, let the wise listen, not speak, and add to their learning. Let the discerning get guidance, not give instructions. Wisdom comes from being in the right position with God, and that position is one of humility and openness. Proverbs 2:1 says, my son, if you accept my words and store up my commands. Proverbs 4:1 says, listen, my son, to a father's instruction, pay attention and gain understanding. Becoming wise starts with being in the right position with God. There are three words that I want you to pay attention to: listen and get guidance and pay attention. These three words and phrases tell us that unless we remain open and receptive to receiving wisdom, we'll never get any wisdom. May your degree and my degree take us as far as it can, but do not think that you have arrived on your journey because there's something hanging on your wall. We've got to keep listening. We've got to keep paying attention. We've got to get guidance. And I want to emphasize paying attention because we are so distracted. We're distracted by our phones. We're distracted by our chaotic schedules. We're distracted by spiritual attacks on us and our family. We're distracted by changes at work. We're distracted by wars and rumors of wars. And the more distracted we are, the harder it is to pay attention. But wisdom comes when we pay attention. If you're going into the workforce for the first time, don't show up on the first day like you know everything. Be wise by paying attention. When parenting is testing your faith, the instinct is to do what our parents did to us. But I'm going to tell you this, it's not a cliche, it's different now. We got to slow down and pay attention. Attaining wisdom starts with being in the right position. Listening is another instruction given to those that want to be wise. And Matthew 7:24, Jesus says that listening is connected to wisdom, and that's connected to a good life. He said, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everybody who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. And so we've got to understand that listening involves two activities. One is physical hearing, and the other is taking the right action. And according to Jesus, when we listen to his words, we are becoming a wise person set up for a good life, because here's the thing. We know that the storms will come. We know that the rain is going to fall, and we know that the wind is going to blow. But when we are wise, then the house will not fall, because the foundation is on a rock. There will be storms of adversity. There will be winds of change. There will be rain of disappointment. There will be contrary winds. And so we need wisdom, because only divine wisdom can build a house or build a life that is able to withstand all of the adverse conditions that come against us. Lord, help us never to get to the point where we don't want to listen to your wisdom or pay attention to your wisdom. So we ask you to keep us from being distracted. His words are a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. Somebody said his words are sweet, even sweeter than a honeycomb. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our Lord stands eternal. Your laws are wise, O God, much wiser than our enemies. When we are low, listening to his word can lift us up again. When we stray, listening to his word can reorder our steps. Your commands are better than gold, even better than pure gold. Therefore, if we want to attain wisdom to live a good life, we've got to assume the right position before God. We've got to be open. We've got to be receptive. We have to pay attention and listen to the words of God. But above all else, if we want to attain wisdom to live a good life, we need to understand that wisdom does not just fall into our laps. Scripture tells us to ask God for the gift of wisdom. Just like Solomon did when God told him to ask for whatever he wanted. And in Proverbs 2, 3, and 4, chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, listen to how it's written. Listen to the verbs in those verses. If you call out for insight, if you cry out for understanding, if you look for it as silver and search for it as a hidden treasure, wisdom has to be something we want so much that we call out for it, that we cry out for it, that we look for it, that we search for it. We don't sit back and wait on it. We don't hope for it, but instead we're going after it. We ask God for it, because the bottom line is that wisdom is something we pursue. And thankfully we have a God who does not play hide and seek with us. When we ask, God responds. When we seek, God will guide. When we cry out, God will answer. When we look, God will reveal. When we call out, God will show up. In the book of James, chapter 1 and 5, it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given unto you. I've got good news for you today. You can ask God for wisdom, because God is the source of wisdom. You'll get information from a whole lot of places, but the best wisdom always comes from God, because it says, for the Lord giveth wisdom, and out of his mouth come knowledge and understanding. We need wisdom for the winds and the waves of life. We need wisdom to help us make decisions in life. We need wisdom to help us stay on the path of God's blessing. We need wisdom to respond to adversity and attacks. We need wisdom when the doors of opportunity open for us. We need wisdom when the season of abundance shows up for us. Leaders need wisdom. Parents need wisdom. Students need wisdom. Sometimes the world thinks that it's wise, but Proverbs says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The word says God will will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and God will make foolish the wisdom of this world. And everything God did for wisdom, God did it in Jesus. It looked foolish of God to be born of a teenager named Mary in a barn in Bethlehem, but that was God's wisdom. It looked foolish for the Son of God to be wrapped in swaddling clothes as a tender, vulnerable baby, but that was God's wisdom. It looked foolish for Jesus to grow up in the middle of nowhere in a place called Nazareth, but that was the wisdom of God. It looked foolish for Jesus to sit down and have dinner with tax collectors and sinners, but that was the wisdom of God. It looked foolish for God to send his only begotten Son so that whosoever believes on him would not perish but have everlasting life. But that was the wisdom of God. To some people, it looks foolish that you and I gather in a sanctuary every single Sunday, that we listen to the choir sing, that we stand and raise our hands to a God we cannot see. And then some preacher will stand in the pulpit talking about, thus saith the Lord. We entrust our future in faith and hope. But this is the wisdom of God. And I'm here to tell you that God's wisdom will guide you. God's wisdom will bless you. God's wisdom will keep you. God's wisdom will sustain you. God's wisdom will protect you. God's wisdom will hold you. God's wisdom will rock you. God's wisdom will walk you. I want that wisdom. I want to move in that wisdom. I want to pray in that wisdom. I want to live in that wisdom. I want to see in that wisdom. To him be the glory forever and forever and forever. God is wise. God's wisdom will often look foolish, but all we have to do is give God time. And some of the things that look foolish now will prove to be wise in the end. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Somebody knows he will. Yes, he will.